Listen with BBC News. A US teenager who shot 2 people dead and injured another during racial justice protests in Wisconsin last year has been found not guilty of murder. In a trial that polarized public opinion, Carl Rittenhouse argued he'd feared for his life and had acted in self-defense. President Biden issued his own statement following the verdict, as Barbara Professor explains. He said he realized many Americans were feeling angry and concerned, myself included, he said, about the verdict, but he went on to give quite a fulsome statement about how people should stay peaceful, that they should respect the rule of law, that violence and destruction were not acceptable, that he'd spoken to the governor. So Mr. Biden clearly is concerned, as are some other people in Kenosha, that this division and the result of the trial might lead to the kinds of protests that were taking place when the incident happened. Wisconsin's Governor Tony Evers called for peace, saying no verdict could heal the wounds of the families involved. But the parents of one of the victims, Anthony Huber, said it meant there was no accountability for the person who killed their son. The president of Belarus has admitted to the BBC that the security forces beat protesters in a notorious detention centre in Minsk in the aftermath of last year's elections that were widely condemned as rigged. Alexander Lukashenko said police had been beaten up during the protests too, although he offered no evidence. In the interview, he promised to continue working against what he called scum, referring to civil organizations he alleged the West had been financing. He also added that Belarusian security forces may have helped migrants try to cross the border into Poland.
Our guys are helping the migrants get into the Polish territory. It's perfectly possible. I think that's absolutely possible. Maybe someone helped them. I won't even look into this.
Europe's top human rights body has called on Poland to allow rights groups and journalists immediate access to its frontier with Belarus. The Human Rights Commissioner for the Council of Europe, Dunia Mijatovic, said she'd heard appalling accounts of extreme suffering from migrants who'd spent weeks in cold, wet woodland during her 4-day visit to the region. Our Europe editor is Danny Eberhard.
Dunia Mijatovic told Warsaw it must stop forcing migrants back across the border, saying there was a risk vulnerable people could suffer abuse or torture at the hands of Belarusian state agents. Ms. Mijatovic also warned of reprisals in Poland against local human rights defenders, citing an attack on a car of volunteer medics, and she called on the government to act on reports that vigilante groups were operating in the region. People's basic rights, she said, were being brushed aside in the current highly politicised situation.
Danny Eberhard reporting. World News from the BBC. Kamala Harris has become the first woman in American history to become acting president of the United States. She took over for 85 minutes as head of state, while President Biden had a medical procedure under anesthetic. Mr. Biden's colonoscopy was found in annual physical checkup. He's now resumed his duties. Leaked documents from a bank in Gabon show vast sums of state funds from the Democratic Republic of Congo have been funneled through companies owned by people close to the former president, Joseph Kabila. A French investigative journal, Mediapart, and the Platform to Protect Whistleblowers in Africa found that tens of millions of dollars worth of public money were deposited into accounts held by these firms. The bank, Mr. Kabila, and his relatives have not responded to questions about the leak. Always Denise is the director of the Platform to Protect Whistleblowers in Africa.
We have 3.5 million of bank statements, email, contracts, mails, and different records. They show how the bank and the agents of the bank created an architecture that would allow Joseph Kabila and his allies to finance public monies in general throughout the decade.
The U.S. Interior Secretary, Deb Haaland, has said she will review and replace racially derogatory terms used in the names of places on federal lands. For example, Ms. Haaland, the first Native American Cabinet Secretary in U.S. history, declared the term squaw a pejorative reference to indigenous women and ordered the creation of procedures to replace all federal uses of it. Police in the Dutch city of Rotterdam have fired warning shots during a demonstration by people opposed to the partial lockdown in the Netherlands because of rising coronavirus cases. Local media says the water tanks were also used to disperse a crowd of several hundred, which had set fire to police vehicles. BBC News.
Hello, you're listening to the Newsroom. from the BBC World Service with me, Jonathan Savage, and President Biden has appealed to Americans to express their views peacefully after a jury found a teenager not guilty of murder in the fatal shooting of two men during racial justice protests last year. Kyle Rittenhouse argued she was repeatedly attacked and had acted in self-defense. Prosecutors said the teenager had behaved like an armed vigilante. Speaking after the verdict, defense lawyer Mark Richards said there was relief for Kyle Rittenhouse and his team.
So it was understatement. Kyle is not here. He's on his way home. He wants to get on with his life. He has a huge sense of relief for what I did to him today. He wishes none of this would have ever happened. But as he said when he testified, he did not start this.
Justin Blake is the uncle of Jacob Blake, who was shot several times in the back by police in August last year. The incident which led to the Kenosha protest taking place. Speaking outside the court, he gave his reaction to the verdict.
You have to understand, from day one, the judge had his hand on his head. He didn't allow videotapes in. He didn't allow He was doing everything he could to hold his young man to the
Of course, there's a mania, if not changes more about the background to the case and the reaction.
Kyle Rittenhouse entered the city on a third night of protesting in Kenosha last year. These protests have been sparked by the shooting of a local black man named Jacob Blake by a white police officer. And he had brought with him a military-style rifle with a series of conversations that he had with Ray Joseph Rosenbaum, Anthony Hoover, and Gage Gossack. And in this series of confrontations, he shot dead the first